Ayurvedic pathology operates on strict biological laws, not abstract philosophy. The system of diagnosis and therapeutics rests on a single foundational axiom found in the Ashtanga Hridaya. The text establishes that identical properties cause the increase of all entities, termed sarvesham. Clinically, this scope refers exclusively to entities taking refuge in the physical body, the mobilizing doshas, the structural tissues, and the waste products. This diagram illustrates what that increase, vriddhi, actually looks like in a patient. It is not generalized growth. Clinically, it is defined as sva pramana adikyam, an accumulation that expands and eventually breaches the boundary of a constituent's baseline, healthy measure. Biological aggravation is never a random occurrence. It is a mathematical outcome driven by the continuous introduction of external properties, perfectly identical to the body's internal entities. To dismantle this aggravation, the text introduces the exact mechanism of clinical cure, viparyaya, or reversal. The commentators provide a deep etymological breakdown of this process. The root word aya, or ayana, means gati, which translates to momentum or directional movement. Disease is a vector with established momentum. The goal of the physician is to engineer viparita gati. By applying a diametrically opposing force, the pathology's momentum is abruptly halted, cracked, and forced into reverse. This breakdown is the foundation of kshaya, or physical depletion. But the principles of similarity and dissimilarity do not operate on a flat plane. A practitioner cannot simply match hot with cold and expect biological reversal. As this coordinate system maps out, the axiom must be applied across a strict three-dimensional matrix: physical substance, inherent quality, and action. We begin with the first dimension, dravya, or physical substance. This is the direct application of elemental mass to manipulate the body's structural tissues. The Ashtanga Sangraha dictates a policy of direct replenishment for depleted tissues. Consuming blood directly builds blood. Consuming animal muscle directly rebuilds human muscle. The biophysics behind this are highly efficient. Because the ingested external substance and the depleted internal tissue share the exact same elemental architecture, like earth or water, the metabolic fire requires zero translation effort. The mass is assimilated immediately. This same elemental logic is weaponized for deconstruction. We call this dravya Viśesha, depletion by substance. The classical text provides a prime example, a wild grain called gavaduka. Its physical structure is heavily dominant in vata, meaning it is composed primarily of the air and space elements. When ingested by a patient with severe fat accumulation, its airy, light elemental mass acts as a physical wedge. It forcefully breaks down and emaciates heavy, earthy tissues like muscle and fat. Physical mass is active. Its baseline elemental structure will either perfectly reconstruct its counterpart or violently crush it. However, relying strictly on elemental mass creates a dangerous blind spot in clinical practice. Consider dates and coconut. Physically, their mass is unequivocally earth. Kapha dosha, on the other hand, is overwhelmingly water. If earth builds earth and water builds water, why do these earthy foods violently aggravate watery kapha? This model reveals the override mechanism, guna Sāmanya, or similarity of quality. Even though the elemental bases are entirely different, they share identical traits. Because dates and coconut possess qualities that are heavy, cold, and highly unctuous, they perfectly mirror kapha's inherent qualities. This triggers an immediate pathological accumulation, completely bypassing the elemental mismatch. The text provides a clinical equivalent for depletion, aranala, a fermented sour rice water. Its physical form is entirely liquid, yet instead of increasing watery kapha, it acts as an aggressive depleting agent. Through the process of fermentation, the liquid acquires a new set of qualities. It becomes light, dry, intensely hot, and sharp. These new properties act as a hostile force, actively dismantling the cold, dense mass of kapha. When qualities are intensely sharp or highly active, they will override the physical substrate that holds them and hijack the biological outcome. The final dimension of the matrix dictates how a patient lives, karma, or action. Action requires a broader definition than mere physical movement. This axis maps three distinct nodes: the activities of the physical body, speech, and the mind. Physical actions operate on the similarity of mobility. Vigorous activities like running or jumping physically mimic the kinetic, erratic nature of Vata dosha, driving its direct accumulation in the body. But the text connects non-physical exertion to identical physiological depletion. Intense study, deep grief, or excessive speech forces the vital energies upward and outward. This creates extreme mental agitation, which literally dries out and exhausts the physical tissues beneath it. To treat a highly agitated pathology, the clinician applies karma Viśesha, depletion through opposing action. Vata is defined by constant kinetic friction. Therefore, the prescribed action must possess zero kinetic turbulence. The patient is prescribed heavy sleep, physical lethargy, and Sāmānya, absolute, unmoving mental tranquility. By completely removing friction, Vata's hypermobile momentum is starved and depleted. Lifestyle and mindset act as literal biophysical vectors. They possess the mechanical leverage to either generate or destroy biological mass. All three dimensions synthesize into a unified diagnostic model, beginning with the Bahirinda Haitu, the external cause. Internal disease is the mathematical result of identical external properties continuously crossing the threshold into the biological system. To track the damage, the commentator Hemadri applies the Ashreya-Ashreyi Siddhanta, the resident-residence theory. This dashboard demonstrates the mechanics. Doshas act as active residents living within the structural boundaries of specific tissue residences. Pitta dosha resides in the blood. Therefore, any food, fiery quality, or aggressive emotion that aggravates Pitta inherently and mathematically aggravates the blood tissue it lives inside. Kapha follows the exact same rule for the remaining structural tissues. Whatever triggers kapha will simultaneously accumulate muscle, fat, and bone marrow. Practitioners do not need to memorize separate causative lists for every distinct tissue. Tracking the momentum of the dosha automatically maps the location and severity of the structural damage. Bringing this theory to the clinic demands absolute precision. The practitioner analyzes the patient's inputs across the three dimensions of substance, quality, and action. They pinpoint the exact homologous factor that matches the internal pathology, and they cut off its supply. Then they engineer the reversal. They administer a precise antagonistic intervention. This means deploying elemental foods that crush the target tissue, utilizing sharp qualities to override heavy masses, and prescribing contradictory mental states to halt kinetic friction, all at the exact same time. By mastering these biophysical mechanics, the practitioner stops managing symptoms. They isolate the pathology's momentum and force it into reverse, engineering true biological depletion.